mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my Storytime. I said I'm on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other, so our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I said me on Instagram. She asked me out to have lunch by ourselves. I said yes. During the lunch, she took me to this really fancy restaurant, and she did not tell me that it was so fancy. So I showed up in jeans and a cardigan. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Oh, why didn't you wear a dress?" I told her I didn't realize the restaurant was so fancy, and I apologized. She said it was okay and for me to sit down quickly. By the way, my boyfriend's family has a lot of money, so she's accustomed to the, nicer things in life. Not so bad sitting in that restaurant with my cheap jeans and my cardigan, while everyone else was in dresses and beautiful sandals. We made small talk and it was actually kind of nice. After we ordered, she started asking me questions though. She started asking me how many boyfriends I'd had in the past, what my friends were like, and she even asked me how much money I earned per year. She was clearly trying to find out if I was only interested in her son's money, which no, I'm not. Then she asked me if I wanted to have kids. I mean, this isn't even a conversation that I've had with my boyfriend yet, so to have it with his mom felt just strange. I told her in the future I definitely wanted to have kids, but not anytime soon. That's when she said that's such a shame. I want grandchildren within 2 years. I laughed and told her that her son and I hadn't even spoken about marriage. We hadn't been together very long. When the bill came, of course I offered to pay for it, but she said, "No, darling, that's okay." But when she looked at the bill, she said, "Wow, that's a lot." Mind you, she was the one ordering the expensive drinks. An hour later, I got a text message from my boyfriend. He said his mom came home crying after having lunch with me. She told him that I was rude to her, that I didn't offer to pay. Part 3. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I want to break up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when my boyfriend told me that his mom came home crying after she had lunch with me. She said that I didn't offer to pay for the bill and that I was rude to her. Of course, I quickly defended myself and told him that never happened. I did offer to pay for the bill. He told me that I needed to give her some time. So a few days later, I went to their house and apologized to her personally. I told her that I was sorry if I had done anything to offend her. She told me that I just needed to be a little more sensitive. So after that, I did not speak to her at all. But she noticed every time I would go over to their house, she would make comments about my clothes, my hair. On one occasion, she hugged me and grabbed my arm. That's when she said, "Wow, from far away it looks like you're thin, but you don't feel very thin." I laughed hysterically. Obviously she wanted to hurt my feelings, but I just thought it was funny. One occasion she brought up my boyfriend's ex, only to insinuate that I wasn't as pretty as her. I laughed at her comment and didn't say anything. She once came over to my boyfriend's apartment while I was cooking and literally proceeded to take over and judge everything that I was doing. She told me that my food was too plain and that she felt bad for my boyfriend, and that obviously he had lost weight because of how terrible my food was. The last straw was when she told my boyfriend that I was talking to somebody on the phone. I told my boyfriend I was talking to my mom, and she told him that she thought it was a man. I know it's not my boyfriend's fault, but he always sides with her. I'm always at a loss. What should I do?
Crazy story time about the girl that my dad was having an affair with. So a little background information. My mom and my dad had been married for 10 years, and they had 3 children. Me, who's the oldest, I'm 16, and then my 2 younger sisters. Well, since I was 12 years old, I've lived with my grandma because of some personal issues that went on at home. Well, because I lived with my grandma, I barely ever saw my family because she lived like an hour away. So I was never in any family photos or anything like that. Well, when I was 15, my dad started coming to my grandma's every Friday and taking me out for pizza. And I thought it was because he just wanted to spend time with me. Well, a few months after he started taking me out for pizza every Friday, I found it really odd that he was getting a hotel for the whole weekend and only seeing me on Fridays. So I had talked to my grandma about it. So my grandma told me that he was having an affair. And she said that she didn't care because she absolutely despised my mom. I didn't tell my dad that I knew because I just thought that it would cause issues between us. Well, the next Friday he came up and we went to the pizza place like for part 2 about the girl that my dad was having an affair with. So like I said, a few weeks later, on a Friday, he takes me out for pizza again. Mind you, we go to the same pizza place every single Friday. Well, we sit down, we're waiting for our pizza, and I notice that there's this girl who keeps staring at me. And I'm like brushing it off, thinking that she's just one of those girls who has an RBF, resting bitch face. So once we were done eating, my dad went to pay. But the pizza place that we were at, they only accepted cash and not card. My dad had to go to the bank, which was like 2 doors down, so it really didn't matter. As soon as he got up and walked out that door, the girl who was staring at me the whole time came straight over and sat down where he was sitting. I'm like, hi. And she just starts going off on me, but not so everybody could hear. She's like, what the fuck is your name? Like, is he cheating on me? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm his daughter. She said, no, you're not. He showed me pictures of his daughters before. Like I said before, I wasn't in any family photos. Like for part 3. Part 3 about the crazy ass girl that my dad was having an affair with. So like I said, she comes over, she sits down. She thinks she's confronting me about being just some random girl that my dad's cheating on her with. And then, like I had said earlier, I was not in any family photos because I had lived with my grandma for years. So she was like, oh, like, no, he showed me pictures of his kids and stuff like that. So because she thought that I was lying, she went up and tried to fight me. But I grabbed this bitch by her hair and I fucking dragged her. And of course, while I'm beating the shit out of her, my dad walks in. He's like, oh my god, what are you doing to her? Let her go, blah, blah, blah. Everybody else is freaking out at this point. We get kicked out. The cops get called. She goes to jail because originally she put her hands on me. And I decided to press charges, even though my dad begged me not to. So then I confronted him about the fact that he only came up once a week to spend one Friday with me, but he got a hotel and spent the whole weekend with her. So now I still live with my grandma. I don't see my dad anymore. He's still having an affair with this girl. I'm still really pissed off about it, so I kind of just want to tell my mom what he's doing.
Husband, 24 male, is withholding my 23 female satisfaction until I lose weight. Husband and I have been married for about 9 months after dating for 2 years. We waited until marriage for mostly due to his religious beliefs. We were both excited for our honeymoon, but unfortunately things took a turn when he ended up unhappy with how I looked naked. Now, keep in mind, I am 5'6" and at the time was 135 pounds, a very healthy weight. Although I was not medically overweight, he said my stomach and thighs were too chunky and requested I lose 20 pounds before we have again. I tend to wear very flattering clothes, so I guess my issues weren't noticeable when dressed. In the meantime, he has been requesting pretty much every day with, of course, no reciprocity of any kind or even affection. Since then, I've been working so hard to lose weight, but my husband still isn't happy enough with my appearance and accuses me of not trying hard enough. In the meantime, I'm hungry and grumpy from losing weight. If not for my husband, I would much rather be at my previous healthy weight and be able to enjoy a burger or a cupcake now and then. I'm afraid I'm falling out of love with him after being treated this way. I know no marriage is perfect, but it's so heartbreaking to be treated like an object that is never quite pretty or shapely enough. And if it's like this, less than a year in, it's probably not going to get better, right? I feel like I'm fading away and losing myself to expectations I can never really meet.
This is bad.
This is fucking terrible.
This is a bad one. Wow. There's no solution except to just be done with this thing. It'll keep going, I feel like. I feel like you could even get to that point, but you shouldn't even have to. This is dumb. You were happy before.
So edit/update. Something just snapped as I was reading all of these incredibly supportive responses, and only then did I realize how far my self-esteem has fallen, that I felt unworthy of love over not being underweight. Called my mom crying and told her everything. She's on her way to get me now, and I can stay with her as long as needed. Husband is still at work, won't be home for a couple of hours, and I'm packing my most critical items in the meantime. We're going to order a pizza. Pizza!
Yes.
Like all exclamations. I don't want to think too much beyond getting some space for a little bit, but we'll be looking into a lawyer to see if I can get an annulment or at least a quick divorce. It means everything to know I will have my family behind me, and I really appreciate you all as well.
Yeah, it feels like she probably feels like she just got out of a nightmare. It feels like when you wake up and you're like, oh.
Am I wrong for not telling my husband I went into labor? I, 32 female, have 3 kids. K, 12 female, L, 4 female, and I just gave birth to my beautiful baby girl, Valerie. My husband and I have been married for 5 years, and I love him, but he's a little bit of a mama's boy. My mother-in-law hates me. I grew up in a richer neighborhood, and my parents left me with quite a lot of inheritance when they passed, about $13 million in assets. Mother-in-law, however, was a single mother with 2 sons and had a lot of trouble just paying for basic needs. She worked her way up, and I think she's very strong. She doesn't like me and thinks I'm pretentious because apparently I had everything handed to me. Well, when I got pregnant with Elle, we decided to name him Luke, after my husband's father, who died when my husband was only 3. Mother-in-law was through the roof when we told her, mother, but ever since I fell pregnant again with Valerie, she has been adamant that we would name her Francine after her late grandmother. My husband wants to as well, but I don't. Instead, I wanted to name her Valerie, and not just because I like the name, but also because when I was 17, the song Valerie by Amy Winehouse came out, and me and my family would sing it all the time. At family gatherings, it was always first on the speaker, car rides, and just in general. It was basically our song. Well, my older sister and my parents passed away in a house fire 3 years ago, and I miss them terribly. We were all a very close family, so it hit me and my younger sister very hard. When I suggested this to my husband and mother-in-law, they actually got mad at me because they wanted it to be Francine. I suggested we name her Valerie with the middle name Francine, or Francine with the middle name Valerie, but they weren't happy with either. During my last month of pregnancy, my husband has become more angry with me. I finally snapped and said that I wasn't going to name my child an ugly name that I don't like for the sake of a woman that doesn't even like me. He said that I was being unbelievable and that I had insulted a strong, independent mother. I immediately apologized, but he left to his mother's house. 2 days later, I couldn't reach him at all, and on the third day I went into labor, Kate kept saying she would text my husband, and I told her not to bother. After hours of labor and awful pain, I gave birth to my baby girl and named her Valerie with Diana as the middle name. Diana was my mother's name. About 2 hours after I gave birth, my younger sister was able to reach my mother-in-law to get the message to my husband. When they came in, my husband was raging and yelling at me, calling me a pretentious, backstabbing bitch, and mother-in-law was more upset about the name. I think this might be the end of my marriage, but we can still change her name if I really wanted to. So, am I the asshole? Should I just change the name?
You've got the most beautiful diamond. You've got the most beautiful diamond eyes I've ever seen in my whole life. The skyline is jealous, I'm looking at you, how you shine. You, you,
Crazy story time about the girl that my dad was having an affair with. So a little background information. My mom and my dad had been married for 10 years, and they had 3 children. Me, who's the oldest, I'm 16, and then my 2 younger sisters. Well, since I was 12 years old, I've lived with my grandma because of some personal issues that went on at home. Well, because I lived with my grandma, I barely ever saw my family because she lived like an hour away. So I was never in any family photos or anything like that. Well, when I was 15, my dad started coming to my grandma's every Friday and taking me out for pizza. And I thought it was because he just wanted to